The role of gender-based violence is important here. We do not really know all that much about it. It's a common narrative that it's a feature of the new wars and that it's a weapon of war. But that does not really bear scrutiny. Some wars generate rapes. The DRC comes to mind, while others do not. There has, for example, been very few reports in the Sri Lankan civil war, and as far as I know, none in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Japanese forces are infamous for the rape of Nanjing, but rapes were not, it appears, a weapon of war. To the contrary, there is evidence that the Japanese military instituted the comfort women system in order to avoid the reactions to the public rapes carried out by soldiers. Investigating the occurrence of gender-based violence is very difficult. It's even more difficult in war, and determining the reasons is even more difficult again. Many authors have therefore fallen back to a generalized narrative based on gender and soldiering. This is unfortunate because it doesn't help us with understanding why there is a difference between DRC and Sri Lanka. And by extension, it does not help us in determining what can be done about the issue in specific circumstances. It's common to divide conflicts into interstate and intrastate ones. Another typology is wars of limited objectives, wars of extermination, and what my colleague Morten Bøes has called regional war zones. The latter are conflicts that have developed to encompass an area or region. The conflict drags on with varying intensity, while the parties do not achieve their initial objectives, forget what their objectives were, or obtain new ones. Meanwhile, the population makes out as best as it can. The three situations are rather different, also when seen from a public health perspective. In the first two, the best we can do is probably to document and prepare for picking up the pieces. In the third, the regional war zone, that raises much more complex issues. It's also probably the area where research and action are the most useful, because the situation is fluid and open. In contrast, when belligerents have their aim fixed, such as the recent Sri Lankan endgame, there is little one can do. An area of mortality studies which considerably less focused than the direct mortality occurring during war is that of the long-term consequences on mortality of war. There is definitely evidence that nutritional stress of the fetus leads to increased chances of mortality, both for infants because of low birth rate, and for adults. Pregnant women who are currently malnourished because of war will give birth to children who in their adult life will face higher risk of mortality than what they would have if there had been not a war been going on when they were in their mother's womb. Some studies indicate that there are in general lingering increased mortality following wars that may have been more related to the functioning of the health system, or lack of such functioning. The whole area of how disease and ill health relates to conflict and how the understanding relates to amelioration is an important one. For example, the realization that refugee camps provided the ideal situation for the spread of measles rapidly led to measles vaccination being instituted as a standard procedure, saving numerous lives. Again, it's important to get our narrative right. Paul Spiegel's work on AIDS and conflict is an excellent example. Like tuberculosis formerly and cancer, AIDS is an ultimate creator of narratives, a threat we cannot defend against. In the context of conflict, the dominating narrative has been that war spread HIV. Paul shows that there is in fact little evidence of that. War-torn countries do not have higher infection rates. Indeed, there are some evidence that military forces are able to control HIV spread better than civilian population. Conversely, the thought that HIV will destabilize African countries does not seem to be true either, as Alex Duval points out. That's at least the case until now. These three areas of research research stress during pregnancy, measles, and age shows the power of what we can achieve if we stick to the narrative grounded in empirical observation rather than what we think is the case. The hopeful idea of health as the bridge to peace is a narrative that basically holds that the forces of good can do good. But it has been done very little beyond the creation of short-term truce days for health campaigns. If greed, grievance, and opportunity are not changed, this multidimensional and dynamic concept, based on the integration of peace-building concerns and strategies into health relief and health sector development in post-conflict transitions, as WHO says, cannot build the trust and identification of common interests which would lead to peace. The problem with the health for peace narrative is the same as many of the others. It's too general and to a large extent based on theory. Even if the general population put health high on its agenda, the warring parties may consider that terrorizing the civilian population is useful and may therefore consider improved health to be against their interests. In such situation, health initiatives may perversely come to be a bridge to more conflict, because it's important to stop health initiatives. Health may also contribute to conflict through providing the belligerents themselves with resources. The Norwegian Church Aid's supply of protein biscuits to a starving population during the Eritrean Liberation War is acknowledged as a significant contribution to the war effect by every ex-fighter I met. The provision of basic health services may help strengthen the legitimacy and capacity of a fragile state. While logical, a link between service delivery and legitimacy is difficult to prove. In one situation, immunization campaigns in northern Nigeria, in the worldwide polio eradication campaign, ran into opposition from local Muslim clergy who contended that the vaccine was part of a US conspiracy to render Nigerians infertile and spread AIDS. As in so many situations, an apparently universal good fell victim to local interests, and also the whole thing resulted in a spread of polio to at least 18 African countries, as far as I remember. The narrative that has been driving this introduction is a local one. Get the description right. In the case of mortality surveys, we discuss what the local conditions are and what methodology we should use at the moment. This is good, and while the ensuing debate may seem frustrating, the trend is that it's getting more and more empirical. In the case of many other areas, we have not been able to get our local descriptions right, and the ensuing narratives are derived more for general concepts and ideas than empirical realities. This is not so good, and we have to find ways to deal with it. So, thank you.